Welcome to episode 4 of If You Stand Still, You Die, an OSTC podcast series, a discussion about AI, trading, and how we keep our edge. My name is Emily Oler, and I'll be your host. I have 3 special guests joining me for this episode: Rose Luckin, professor at University College London, and Chris Jenkins, co-head of ZISHI. Joining them today is Lee Hodgkinson, CEO of OSTC. In this 4th episode, we will be discussing the benefits of ZISHI Adaptive, capital deployment, and risk management. If you haven't heard our first 3 episodes, check them out to hear about AI from our experts and how ZISHI Adaptive was born. Stay tuned after our discussion to hear about what's coming up for our 5th and final episode. But now, let's get right into it. So in this episode, we're really going to talk about the overall benefit of Adaptive as it sits within OSTC, how it benefits the business, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Rose, over to you.
Hi. Actually, I'm not sure it isn't a good to start with Lee as the CEO, the business benefits that he sees. But I think the important thing that I would point out straight away is that the approach we're taking with Adaptive is looking at a very rich set of indicators, and certainly beyond the kinds of performance indicators that are perhaps normally used to think about evaluating the way that the trading business is operating. So we don't just look at volume and P&L, we look at a whole set of factors about the traders that include things like extroversion, conscientiousness, openness to experience, because we can see from the data that we've viewed at OSTC that there's a clear connection between trader behaviors, cognitive abilities and traits, and performance. So it's about really seeing Adaptive as a very rich set of indicators that looks across a very varied data set to help the company understand its business more, understand its workforce more, understand how to recruit people who are going to benefit from the training and perform well, and then help to know how best to mentor those people once they're in the workplace. And that's something that's really important for businesses as we move forward. Knowing your workforce intimately is a really valuable information set to have to add to the knowledge of your business.
Absolutely. Lee, I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think Rose is absolutely right. Knowing your workforce is what it's all about. I mean, when I arrived at the firm 2.5 years ago, one of the first questions that I asked people like Chris was, what makes a good trader? So how do we filter, the hundreds of candidates we get, and pick those with special abilities, and how do we know that they're the right people to go forward as risk takers in our firm? And I got many different answers. It reminded me of the Spartacus movie, when he says, which one of you is Spartacus? Everyone puts a hand up. I got a very slightly different view on what makes a good trader from, almost everybody I talked to. And what was really striking about the answers that I got was how anecdotal they were. There was very little true empirical data. Mm-hmm. And people would say things, well, we run mathematics tests and, we do all these kind of standard things, but there was no real empirical understanding and insight into why person A performs better as a trader than person B. And so the work that Chris was already doing with Rose's team seemed to me to be offering a fantastic pathway to solving that question and to really understanding what are the characteristics, innate or otherwise, that are dominant in successful traders? And how do we get to know about that? How do we get to predict who has them and who doesn't have them and how they can be developed? So this kind of understanding the workforce, knowing the workforce, really using artificial intelligence techniques to gain actionable insights, not just for the benefit of OSTC, but actually, importantly, for the benefit of each individual, because the most successful people are those people that do jobs that they love and that they're well suited to, right? And so it seemed to me, for everybody's benefit, that having an empirical way of divining what makes a good trader would be a really mission critical thing for us to have if we were to grow successfully and rapidly as a firm.
Right. Amazing. I mean, we've talked a lot about how Adaptive has helped us at OSTC and how it's helped our traders and how, we're growing from that knowledge. How can this really help, with risk management, not only within our industry, but in other industries and other businesses? Is that something that we're looking at too, is sort of taking this data sets, using it not only for us, but for other people as well?
Well, certainly we believe that the techniques that we're employing in the trading business can be applied to other roles in financial services and other firms, but also beyond that into other industry sectors, and essentially wherever there are jobs that require material risk-taking and decision-making whilst processing large amounts of fast-moving, complex data. Mm-hmm. And, that could be airline pilots, for example. It could be surgeons. It could be train drivers, all kinds of construction-related roles, I'm sure. And so, we think that there is a lot of application for those techniques. And in working with Rose's team, we've developed data models and processes that are agnostic to the job content. So we're quite hopeful that once we once we get established, we can move far beyond financial services into other industry sectors.
Amazing. Chris, I'd love to hear from you on that.
Just picking up from what Rose said, I think one of the key things for us, and I think I mentioned it briefly on one of the earlier episodes, was, we as a company have sat on such large amounts of data, but actually knew in truth relatively small amounts about the initial question that Lee asked to us, really, which was, what is it that makes a good trader, etc. And we weren't saying that the company was broken or anything, but there was always room for this improvement. And it's like a resource that we weren't using, and for the benefit of the company as a whole, to help us, just understand the types of trader we have and their preferences, and without being able to, but looking at the data in a deep level, and then be able to use that and create technology that we can use to the benefit of the whole firm. Now, as we've said previously, the way we want to use what we found now is developing our mentoring tool that will help our managers manage at scale initially brand new traders that come through, but in future also more senior traders. And in a post COVID world, or in a COVID world at the moment, that ability to manage at scale and have access to large amounts of data that can be analyzed very quickly and give real insights to a mentor or mentee is more relevant now than perhaps it's ever been. And so for us, it's, we 100% see the benefits for us as a firm and the future benefits for traders. But it's not just restricted to the world of trading, we don't think. Everyone out there, every reasonably large business will have data that they can use to benefit themselves by simply finding answers to perhaps problems that they've been trying to solve for a while. And that's kind of the journey that we're on and are taking. And obviously with the help of Rose's team are making headway. And certainly our view is that it's not just going to be us that are trying to solve these issues or problems, or what we really say is, chasing these marginal gains. As always, we aren't saying that we've got the silver bullet. It's very much trying to incrementally improve at business level, at individual level, but also not being too overly concentrating on just trading. Our techniques can be used elsewhere too.
Right. Because we do have, other departments within our company it's not just traders. So is there something that, that could definitely be in the future looking at sort of those different aspects, sort of the human side of it, right? And I know we're definitely going to be talking about humanity and AI and sort of how that comes together in our next episode. But if there's anything you wanted to touch on in that, like how you see that, those incremental gains gaining traction now, and how sort of like, what the data is really and what's underneath that data. What are we really getting at? What are we looking at? What are we seeing more than just the usual commissions and trading volumes? We'd love to hear you talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So if you think about us as OSTC as a business, with this vast amounts of data that we are sat on, that would be almost impossible for us to analyze fully and come to the conclusions that we have by using the smart people in Rose's team and the data science specialists. And so really what we are saying is, when we're looking at the data that lies beneath the surface, what we would kind of describe as implicit, that we know is there but haven't really ever analysed in the depth that we are now, and letting the analysis find correlations that we wouldn't be able to find relationships between these different variables, whether it be the characteristics of markets, the approach of traders, the changing market conditions, the area of the curves that people are looking at. And from that, then coming to conclusions about behaviors that we wouldn't have seen before, or wouldn't have necessarily known before, because it was almost impossible to see them. Whereas, again, my former roles within OSTC and many of the office managers out there will be able to, on the surface, see very common behaviors that you can see with your own eyes and to a certain extent on the screen. But again, the analysis that we're doing and the vast quantities of data that we're looking at, when it's coming down to individual clicks of the mouse, is a much deeper and higher level of analysis to uncover information and insight that we wouldn't have had. And why are we doing that? Well, it's for the benefit of us as a business, and to make that into actionable insight that we can use, which previously we weren't.
Amazing. Lee, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that in many respects we're at the beginning of all of this. So what we're learning from the actionable insights, really, I think I get the sense that we're only at the beginning of it all. So, there's a tremendous amount of data that we're getting through, and we're working on, how we take action, how we change our processes, how we think about growth. But in terms of where we can take these activities and the technology going forward, particularly around mentoring capabilities, I think will start to open up another brand new realm of possibilities. And this idea of using artificial intelligence techniques to educate our employees and help them become better versions of themselves and to expand their horizons is something incredibly exciting, and of course is a speciality of you, Rose. And maybe you want to talk a bit about the potential for ethical AI in education.
Absolutely. And I think what's really exciting about what's happening at OSTC with Adaptive is the way that we're looking at individual people in a very rich way. So if I think about a concept like conscientiousness, for example, and we can think about that as being comprised of orderliness and dutifulness and cautiousness. Well, you could imagine that for some roles in your company, you might want there to be a high score on orderliness, dutifulness, and cautiousness. But then for other roles, you might actually need a combination of some higher scores and some lower scores. So dutifulness may not be the most important thing, and orderliness may not be the most important thing. And actually, you might not want somebody who's absolutely cautious and investigates everything before they make a step. It really depends on the role in your company. But once you've used data and the analytical techniques that we can apply to understand your workforce, then of course you can apply that to any part of your business. And with the right training of the algorithms, you can look and see how that can help you understand how other businesses can be helped as well. But thinking about your question, Lee, about ethics, of course, you are using quite intimate data about people. And so it's really important that everybody whose data is being used understands why their data is being collected. They have it explained to them as to what is being done with that data and how it's useful to them, as well as to OSTC and indeed to their colleagues. And of course, then there's the nitty-gritty of making sure that any data is stored very securely and that it's not, other people are not giving access to that data. So yes, when you're dealing with the kinds of information about individuals that we're dealing with, which are incredibly important and valuable to any business, particularly as we go through the fourth industrial revolution, and we need to think about how we can help a workforce to develop, we need to understand that workforce in detail. But of course, that comes with the responsibility to make sure that you use that data wisely, you store it securely, and that you are ethical in everything you are doing when it comes to the application of AI within education.
Amazing. Rose, I heard you mention something about the fourth industrial revolution. I'd love to sort of have you just touch on that and then how it relates to AI.
Absolutely. So the fourth industrial revolution was one of the main things that was on the mind of most people who were thinking about education, training, and particularly technology prior to about March this year, when the pandemic became the thing that everybody was worrying about. But the fourth industrial revolution is the way the world of work is changing for many reasons, globalization, for example, but primarily because of increased automation, increased use of very sophisticated artificial intelligence that is automating many roles in the workplace. So if you think about automated self-driving vehicles, it's not just cars on the road, it's lorries transporting goods, it's forklift trucks in warehouses, it's robotic movement of different items within a business. And actually that automation is moving very much from the traditional, more blue-collar jobs into more of the administrative white-collar jobs. And so there is change happening in the workplace. And that means that many employees will be finding that their roles will change and they'll need to develop new skills, abilities. And that means that we need to be ready to help train people in those skills and abilities. Now, what better tool to have at your disposal than a really clear understanding of the strengths and weaknesses of your workforce when you think about how you might move that workforce forward?
I think this is a very interesting point, right? Because it's really about the future of work. And in the context of our purpose and vision. So, potential unbound, and this idea that anyone anywhere can learn and trade, changing lives for the better. Technology and used in the context of what Rose is pointing out really is at the vanguard of driving that change. So why, what better way of fulfilling the anyone, anywhere construct, what better way of fulfilling that than using technology to empower and educate individuals, to give them the skills and the opportunity to thrive in the new environment. It's often looked at as a negative outcome, which is understandable, but I think we look at it as a catalyst for incredible positive change, particularly for those individuals. I mean, there are 1.8 billion young people on planet Earth aged between 10 and 24 years old. It's the largest single demographic in the history of humankind. They all need education. They all need jobs. Is a massive opportunity in there for an organization like ours to go out to the emerging markets and elsewhere and give people the opportunity which they can capture through the use of cognitive technologies. So it's an incredibly exciting time for our organization and the growth opportunity and upside that we see ahead of us.
Amazing. And this is when AI really can come into play to take all that data, all those billions of people out there who do need to get educated and to find work, to use that to help not only us, but other businesses and themselves. So it's a really exciting time, definitely. Chris, I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, just picking up on something that was said earlier when we're touching on the mentoring tool, and when you were asking about what we've looked at beneath the surface and found.
Yes.
We've actually, quite interestingly, throughout this process, come across some findings that we weren't really looking for. So, just one example that always sticks in my mind is when we were doing the analysis of all of the data, we were noticing changes in traders' behavior, not necessarily performance, but just changes in the way that they are interacting with the markets, which then became a predictor of when traders would leave OSTC. And now that was a really interesting point to look at. For those listening who might think, we often see trade changes in behavior such as, falling volume, falling P&L. No, actually what we're talking about are changes that we wouldn't be able to have normally perceived in terms of the way people were interacting with the markets, and being a clear indicator then of them leaving, 6 to 8 months later. Now, the opportunity that rises for us as a company is if we can intervene earlier than perhaps we would have intervened in the past to help that individual overcome whatever issue they were having, whether it be an issue with their trading or maybe something's happened outside of trading that's impacting their performance, we can hopefully catch those individuals before they go too far down the line of deteriorating performance and end up leaving the company. Now, the benefits of that for OSTC as a business are obviously massive, but also for the individuals, if they can, if a manager or mentor can intervene that much earlier and stop that end result of them leaving the company, then it's win-win. Now, you look at the kind of power of that insight for any industry. Ultimately, you never want your staff to be leaving as long as they're performing. And if you have people that are performing, but all of a sudden their behavior change and it's a real strong indicator of them leaving, then we can intervene before. And that's a massive. We weren't even looking for that, is my point. And there's been multiple scenarios where the data has given us an insight into things that are happening that we didn't know, and that's really one of the main examples of where we weren't looking for it, but actually the data told us it, and again the actions we can take off the back of that are huge. And that's for us is going to be obviously one of the features that we're going to have in the mentoring tool, so that we can make sure mentors can be proactive and help traders as much as possible.
Amazing. And it seems like the more data you analyze, the more those sort of trends pop up. Is that true, where you might not be looking for something, but you see sort of a repetition of that data coming up and it sort of leads to other things?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I've learned from working with Rose and her team is if ever it comes to data of any kind, the more the better, essentially. Because certainly, the more data you have, the more you can analyze, and the more that will be effectively, insight you'll be given. Not all data is usable, of course, but certainly the more data we have, the better. And that's why, as time goes on, our recruitment or profiling tool will get stronger and more accurate. It's very much in its alpha phase at the moment. The mentoring tool that's due to be deployed in 2021 will naturally get stronger as we go on, as it grows in strength and gathers and analyzes more data, for sure.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, it sort of sits in the name, right? Artificial intelligence. So it's learning. The more we give it, the more it learns.
That's absolutely true. Can I just make a point, Emily?
Yes, absolutely.
I think one of the things that's important about what OSTC are doing, and what struck me the very first time I met Chris, who was the first person I met from OSTC, was the emphasis on people. OSTC is a people business, and they care deeply about the people who work at OSTC. And I think that's a really nice emphasis, because when you think about data-driven AI, data-driven businesses, data-driven systems, but this is a people-driven business. But that doesn't mean that you can't still leverage data to help those people flourish. It's all about human flourishing. And I think it's important to recognize the way that the approach taken here is about the humans in the loop with the artificial intelligence. It's not about the AI and the data driving the business without that really important grounding in what is going to help the people in the business flourish. Because whatever helps the people in the business flourish will help the business flourish.
Absolutely fantastic. And that's actually exactly what our whole next episode is going to be about. Artificial intelligence, humanity and ethics, the human in the loop. So on that note, Rose, Chris, and Lee, thank you so much for joining me today. And for all of our listeners, please join us for the next episode, where we'll be discussing artificial intelligence, humanity, and ethics. Once again, I'm Emily Oler, and this was If You Stand Still You Die, an OSTC podcast series.